Hello and welcome back to another episode of Coffee Wednesday, and this is the part of our show where we get to talk about different ways to bring back the pleasure of reading and self-education into your life. And this week's episode, and this is something I'm very excited about, and today we're going to give you a 3-part game plan for unhooking your life from social media, or it doesn't really have to be social media. You might be addicted to watching Netflix, you might be addicted to scrolling on TikTok, or you might just be addicted to watching YouTube videos. How ironic, given that we're on YouTube right now. So how do we take back control from these platforms? And how is there a more constructive way to talk about the attention crisis that we're going through right now? Is there a way that focuses on the solutions and to give people a sense of optimism that they too can change? They too can unhook themselves if they have the will to do so or the motivation to do so. That's what we're going to talk about in today's episode. And before we start here, this issue on attention was addressed extensively on my newsletter, A Mug of Insights. And I wrote a 3-part series called Protocols for Rescuing Your Attention. And a lot of people love that series. And in fact, it's a part of our paid membership plan. So this is one of the ways that you can support this show. If you haven't noticed, the past maybe 6 or 7 episodes had no sponsors on them. For example, even over at the podcast feed, which you can also check out from the links in the description down below, no sponsors. And this is because I have over 170 generous paid subscribers to this newsletter, and it keeps the lights on around here, and it keeps the show nice and concise and packed full of research and information without relying on algorithms or advertisers' interference. So if you're interested in the content that I'm providing, if you want this show to thrive independently, and if you want the kind of content that I provide to be impactful, to have something that you can change your life with, consider becoming a paid member to the newsletter. It's going to help me out a lot, and it's really going to keep everything here running smoothly. So nevertheless, let's get back to this game plan. So I actually want to tell you a little bit of a story. So what got me into this game plan, what really got me into this attention crisis was the fact that back in July of this year, 2025, I too was going through some kind of a personal attention crisis. So for context, I was in Oxford and London back in March. I was over there doing a TEDx talk. That's a different talk show. I'll talk about that TEDx talk soon. There's a really, really funny story to happen to that talk. But nevertheless, after that entire trip, I was sort of in this vortex of distractions. So I started to work on a nonfiction and sort of this advice type playbook for Bloomsbury. And I can't really talk about the book just yet, but I'll tell you guys more about it in the coming months. So I was supposed to write that book, and I got really intimidated and really stressed by everything. So my default response was to put extra work onto social media, or to put out extra content on Instagram, and to put out all the things that I've been putting out throughout the months of March to the point of July. So during all that process, I watched so much social media, and I consumed so much content under the guise of I'm doing research. And this entire process basically wrecked my attention span. So in the month of July, I couldn't physically get through a book. So in July, I clocked an impressive half of a book a month. So alarm bells were ringing in my head, and I thought to myself, back in university, you used to read, Jesus Christ, 3 books in any given month. You can just dig through your class readings like it was nothing. It's where did that attention span go? So I went on a bit of a personal odyssey, personal voyage in the coming months, trying to discover the solution for this problem. Is it the fact that I'm reading something that doesn't really interest me? Is it the fact that I'm not reading the right books? Is it the fact that my reading techniques are all over the place? So given that I am the kind of person, so I was the person who spent 8 years teaching this kind of stuff on YouTube, this question really confounded me. It really was confusing. So at the same time, I was going through this identity crisis, which is, you're known as the reading guy on YouTube. What happens if the guy who preaches reading all the time struggles to read half a book a month? So this kicked off a rather desperate research project where I got my hands on everything possible, from nonfiction books on attention span to how to train your attention, and then the different drills that you can do. And I stumbled upon a few books that really changed the entire perspective on this topic of attention, and I started reading them. started practicing these techniques. And then I think it was back in September, I got my reading attention back. I got my focus back, and I ended up reading 6 books that month. It was kind of like a miracle moment for me. So I really want to share the 3 major lessons that I got from this entire journey. And beyond that, it extends beyond reading. It also extends into how you want to spend your time and who you want to spend your time with, and the kind of activities that are actually going to replace your social media addiction. Those are also important to talk about. So that's what we're going to address in this 3-part game plan. So number 1, you have to realize that if you ever want to embark on this unhooking your life from social media process, you have to realize that willpower is not enough. So one of the first things people tell you is that you should just resist checking your phone, or you should just resist the kind of stuff that's being advertised to you, or you should just resist this new show that just came out. It's not really a willpower problem. And yes, some willpower protocols will work in a short term, but from all the research on willpower, it's very clear that willpower runs out after a certain point. So sometimes you wake up in the morning feeling like, yeah, I'm ready to change, and you stop checking your phone, you stop going on Instagram, but towards like 7 or 8 p.m., it's really hard to resist that temptation because your willpower actually degrades over the course of a day. And of course, after a few weeks of struggling against yourself, after a few weeks of like splintering yourself into this social media fiend and this higher consciousness human being who can resist social media, this battle gets so tiring that maybe after a few months, you would declare, attention bankruptcy. You would totally give up on this entire process because you simply believe that, I'm just a shit person. I don't have any willpower, so la-di-da, I might as well just go on social media because it makes me happier. The real culprit here, if we can assign blame to anything, is a lack of intention. It has nothing to do with willpower. Willpower is a part of it, but the bigger picture is that if you struggle to quit social media, if you struggle to step away from these platforms, it's more likely that you're struggling from an intention problem. Because if you think about it, now we have some of the smartest and richest and the most talented workforce in the history of our entire planet working on mechanisms to keep you glued to the screen. So of course, if you don't engineer your intentions and if you're not very deliberate about what you're trying to get out of social media, your default is to spend more time on these platforms. Your default will become clicks that's going to get converted into dollar amounts for these companies. So it's way more important, rather than just setting like a willpower-based goal, I shouldn't do this or I shouldn't do that. We need to reverse that entire thinking process into what I should do. Instead of shouldn't, which creates guilt and shame and resistance, what I should do creates motivation. It creates a clearer picture of what you want. And it creates somewhat of a nice dreamy feeling of like, okay, one day my life could look like that. So setting that intention is super important, and also is going to give you a sense of clarity against all these incoming currents of content, distractions, everything that's just trying to pull you away from just living your life. And of course, if you don't have anything going on in your life, no intentionality, and nothing that you're working for, and no ambitious dreams that you're chasing after, of course you're going to become like the easiest prey for these companies to prey on. So of course, number 1, you have to define your intentions. You have to define a life outside of social media. And you have to start to think of it as a constructive process instead of a destructive process. It's all about addition instead of subtraction. So subtraction is only a tool, or the social media detox is only a tool for you to get to somewhere you want to be. So prime example from my story. So back in August, my girlfriend referred me to this karate sensei, and then she was taking some self-defense lessons from him. And then she said to me, I think you would really enjoy this. This sensei is like a star sensei in the neighborhood. So I thought to myself, let me try a lesson. So the story went, I went in there for my first karate lesson, basic stuff. I was a white belt. And the kind of exhilaration that I got from practicing karate and the kind of exhilaration that I got from just physically exerting myself got me so excited that now I've decided to go 3-4 times a week. And I've been doing so for the last 2 months. And of course, I recently got three. I recently got 3 stripes on my white belt. So I'm going up for my yellow belt grading pretty soon. So for all you karate people out there, this is not that impressive. But for me, this is these 3 stripes here. It goes to show what life could look like for me outside of just scrolling on my phone, just outside of just watching Netflix endlessly, and just outside of all the things that these tech companies tell us, you need this to be happy. Actually, the reverse process, or the reverse is actually true. The polar opposite is true. You will find more joy in a well-intentioned life outside of these platforms. And imagine a life where you can define what makes you happy. Imagine a life where you have the space and mental clarity to explore what ticks your box, what floats your boat. For me, it might be karate. For you, it might be getting into analog music. For you, it might be learning a new musical instrument. Something like that. Have a clear vision and have intentions to not default to some of these mechanisms that are keeping you glued to the screen. And that's the first thing. I want you to get out a sheet of paper and kind of go through this process of what are 2 to 3 things that I'm really excited to do? What are 2 to 3 things that are just if I have more time, I would do that. Yeah, your time is probably spent on social media. And if you don't clarify what it is that you want to do after you've removed a significant amount of your distractions, well, it's simply not going to motivate you enough to pursue that. So take out a sheet of paper, pause the video if you have to, and come up with these 3 things. And now we're ready to move on to the second part of our game plan, which came to us from Cal Newport. Without surprise, he's kind of like the figurehead on this whole digital minimalism kind of thing. So he proposed that for the second step in our game plan, he proposed a 30-day digital decluttering. So digital decluttering, some people confuse this idea with a dopamine detox where you have to move to a cave, or you have to kind of withdraw yourself from your social life and then kind of just meditate for 6 hours a day to try to get to a state of spiritual equilibrium. But in reality, it's a lot less demanding than that. It's actually crazy how simple it was when I started doing my digital decluttering. So basically, it's a 30-day period where you would intentionally detach yourself from all non-intentional or unnecessary forms of digital distractions. So for my 30 days challenge, I stopped my access to my PS4. I turned off my subscription to Netflix and Amazon Prime. I basically nuked all my social media apps from my phone. I still kept the account on my desktop because sometimes I have business inquiries to write or people to reach out to, and that's another part of the digital decluttering. If you need these tools for work, or if you need it for a certain role in your job, well, keep it, but just keep the desktop version of it so that it functions like an email inbox, so that it's no longer like a constant companion that follows you everywhere. It's not like Facebook buzzes in your pocket every 2 seconds. Remove everything from your phone. That's the rule of thumb during your digital decluttering, and only keep the essential things on your computer where there's a buffer of resistance. And once you've removed all the non-essential tech, and this includes your newsfeed, it includes your compulsive podcast listening habits, and it includes all sorts of non-essential things that you tend to check. For example, stocks, or for example, all the crazy little updates that you get on your Amazon page for what you should read next. Remove all of it. Just start from a clean slate. Keep the ones that you need for your job, for what you need to do for work, but remove everything else. Right? And then there are some significant tools, or there's some really powerful tools that you can leverage. For example, Screen Zen is a really good one for your iPhone for cutting down even inbox time on your iPhone. Or things like Unhook, where you can disable the YouTube algorithm on your computer, or you can just use a physical protocol, like I'm just not going to go on my computer and go on social media. I would only reply to messages for 30 minutes a day on my computer and not access social media throughout the day. So that's what decluttering looks like. It's not like you're going to throw your whole digital life out of the window. It's a momentary suspension so that you have the space and time to clarify the things that we talked about in the first part, which is, what do you actually want? What's your intention with this whole social media quitting thing? And what is it that's outside of social media that you desperately want to get to, but this thing or this distraction is kind of standing in your way? So once you remove all of that, now here comes the important part. Here's where a lot of people fail in their social media quitting journey, which is finding replacements. Finding replacements. So from some of the research that we have into addiction recovery, and of course into unhooking yourself from a bad habit, if there's no replacement, it is as if you're just running in circles because your craving is going to get so bad, the same neurological circuits are not getting rewarded so that you would default back to where you started. So you're running in a circle. So now, once you have this space from your digital decluttering, now it's really important to explore analog alternatives. So if you loved watching a lot of videos on YouTube, what are some of the buttons that those videos are pressing? Is it for entertainment? Is it for a kind of sensual pleasure? Or do you just want to get on YouTube just because you want to distract yourself? You can find analog equivalents. For example, a really good hack here is if you're really into movies, go physically buy the DVD or the CD and play it on your TV. So you have a start and end. And you don't have this infinite algorithmic problem where you watch one thing and it leads to 4 hours of unintentionally spending a lot of your time on these platforms. So find an analog replacement for all these things that you used to crave from algorithms and your social media accounts. And for example, if you're really into music, one thing that I did, this is pretty drastic, one thing that I did during my decluttering was I paused my subscription for Spotify, because on Spotify, I don't just listen to music. I try to seek out podcasts. I listen to like 2 seconds of a podcast and jump to another one. I listen to 5 seconds of one song and jump to another one. And I said to myself, okay, what's an analog equivalent to scratch that itch in my brain? So I went ahead and went to JB Hi-Fi, which is kind of like a video store in Australia. So I went to JB Hi-Fi and got myself like a stack of jazz CDs and a bunch of Elton John titles. So I got a stack of CD and I would just put it in my car and listen to these albums front to end. And that turned out to be a much better music experience for me, of like experiencing the entire album the way they're supposed to be listened to, which is from front to end. And I ended up like enjoying the process so much that now I switched to Apple Music. This video is not sponsored by Apple Music, but I switched to Apple Music because Apple Music has this album first and single second approach to listening to music. And I really enjoy that. And in fact, I still retain this practice till this day. So find analog equivalents or find analog activities that are going to scratch the same itch. And this process or this journey should be pretty exciting. It's like, ever wanted to play the guitar? Well, now you have the space because your life is free of digital clutter. Ever want to just like start collecting your vinyls or start revamping your vinyl collection again? Well, you have time to do that now. And sometimes I'm an information fiend. Instead of jumping on YouTube for quick hits of information or rage bait content, well, just read a book on the subject. And then in that process, you don't even need to consciously think about, I'm going to resist social media. The temptation's no longer there. What you have is an open space, a wide open landscape for you to like, hey, I wonder if that thing is going to be interesting. And I wonder if that thing's going to trigger or scratch the same itch. And this process is so magical is because over time, you will start to develop an appreciation for free time. And you'll start to reach the conclusion that actually quality free time might involve a bit of upfront effort. So for me, in the music case, it requires the upfront effort of digging through all the CDs in a video store or in a audio visual store, right? It might require some awkward conversations with the store clerks. It might require a tiny financial investment of like, okay, this CD is like, what, $10? Damn it, I could stream it on Spotify, but I'm just going to pay that $10 and so be it. So it might require some upfront effort. But over time, you're going to start to realize that, hey, quality free time isn't for free. If it's free, and if everyone learns to enjoy these intentional free times, all these tech companies will practically go out of business. They would not have an incentive to exist because their sole motive is to keep you on the platform so they can sell you a bunch of ads. So if you want to have this whole process work out for you, you need to go into it with the expectation that this kind of entertainment or this kind of new way of exploring your free time will take some effort. It's going to be way more effort than scrolling on TikTok. But what you're going to get in return is a lot sweeter. It's a lot more motivating, and it's really going to pave the way for you to explore something a lot more extraordinary beyond scrolling on your phone. So the last step is kind of the most important step if we want some large-scale changes to occur to this entire problem. So let's just say you're convinced that you need to do a 30-day digital declutter. And let's just say that this entire idea really excites you. So after you've done your 30 days, you're going to start to wonder, okay, is there actually a role for all these digital distractions in my life? Is there actually a purpose for Instagram to exist on my phone? So these questions will start to bubble up, and you start to realize, yeah, these social media apps, they're not essential. I've figured that out throughout my decluttering. You know, I can live without Instagram for 30 days on my phone all the time. I can live without Netflix for 30 days. I can live without YouTube for 30 days. But there are some things that are way more convenient if I hop on these platforms. But now that, given that you have the clarity to even think that thought in the first place, so you don't just default to these platforms, now you can start to work on something called attention resistance. And attention resistance, I would link to some books that tackle this subject, namely 2 books, Johann book, Stolen Focus, and Cal Newport's book, Digital Minimalism. They explain these concepts beautifully, way more beautiful than I can put it here in a short video. But attention resistance basically wants you to develop this actively antagonistic relationship to algorithms and the agenda of these tech companies. And practically what this looks like is, number 1, declare war on algorithms entirely. Remove them from your phone, and if you have web plugins, for example, for YouTube, there's a way to disable all recommended videos. And there's a way to stop using TikTok and somehow still search for the same things. You can actually search up TikToks on Google. If you really need to access one specific TikTok, if it's just that funny, you can search for these TikToks on Google without relying on algorithms to do your bidding. And then there are a lot of these practices, and I think it makes a lot of sense for me to talk about my practice right here. If you haven't noticed that this channel started to prioritize long-form content and has stopped playing the algorithm game. And my main intention here is to, talk to talk and walk to walk. And I kind of realized that in order for me to really declare war on short attention span and algorithmically motivated content, I really have to change my approach to content. So now I'm kind of doing this episodic form every week so that the videos are a lot more substantial, and you'll walk away from these videos with a lot more substance compared to like a 10-minute rant that I used to do on my channel, right? So that's kind of my personal approach. And if you haven't noticed, I entirely stopped posting on Instagram. I stopped producing short form videos, and I stopped all sorts of behaviors that would potentially feed back into the algorithm. So that's what attention resistance looks like. It's an active questioning of, is there even a role for these tools in our lives? And the kind of tools that we have in our lives, they have to work for us. So the motto here is be a late adopter. Make sure that your intentions and what you want outside of social media is completely aligned with how you intend to use this technology. And another way to do this, which I've covered in the video before last week's video, which was on how to stay informed without going insane. In there, I kind of proposed a process where there's a more intelligent way to consume the news instead of relying on algorithms, which is to self-curate the sources that you want to read. So that's another act of attention resistance. You're reclaiming the ownership that you have over how you treat your mind. You're reclaiming the substance in your media diet, and you're kind of reclaiming everything that you hold sacred. So you're not getting sucked into or funneled into unnecessary detours that's only going to make more money for these companies and not a lot of great benefits for you. So attention resistance wants you to recognize that these companies don't have your best interests in mind. And these companies will do whatever it takes to keep you glued to the screen and buying shit you don't need just so they can make a lot more money. So it's about recognizing that and then adopting an actively antagonistic relationship with these algorithms and then find ways to circumvent the algorithm. So I cover this extensively in that video on how to stay informed without going insane. And of course, I covered it in my 3-part series. So if you want the nitty-gritties and the practical exercises for how to place attention resistance in your life, or how to frame your behavior in your personal life to a larger issue of attention, make sure to check out part 3 of my 3-part series called Join the Attention Resistance. And over there, I give you a list of different things that you can do to benefit your own mental health, and of course, to fight back at these companies with ulterior motives. So quick recap before we go here. Number 1, you need to define your intention, because a life outside of social media is a lot more interesting, and you need to know what that is to give yourself the motivation necessary to go pursue this game plan. And number 2, you need to do a 30-day digital declutter, where you remove non-essential technology from your life for 30 days and reintroduce analog alternatives to give you a sense of like, what am I actually looking for in these tech products and platforms and companies? And last of all, join the attention resistance, because this is how you can really extract the value, the core value that these companies claim to provide, without falling into the pitfall of always remaining on your screen for the benefits of these companies. So that's all I have for this week. Hope that you have enjoyed this game plan, and I will be back next week to tackle more aspects and more facets of this problem. It really interests me. So nevertheless, R.C. Walden here. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next Wednesday. Take care, and goodbye.